firstly, Hussain, Yousuf, I'll address the first question to you. And it is, what do you think are the barriers of entry for businesses and entrepreneurs here in the Gulf, and how are regulators like yourself working to remove those, and how have they worked to remove them in their recent years?
Okay, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to congratulate Media City and congratulate Bloomberg on a successful event. I think this event is very well organized. I think last year it was a bit shoulder to shoulder, packed, crowded. Now I can say that this is closer to a type of maybe a Davos, similar to what we have in Davos and what we had in Saudi. So we're very happy for that. Congratulations. In terms of your questions, I don't like to talk about barriers because I'm supposed to be attracting investments, and I'm supposed to be saying there's no barriers. But if we look at the GCC as a whole, I think one of the biggest barriers when it comes to multinational corporations doing business in the region is mostly, first of all, the cultural differences. A lot of the companies that base themselves here usually don't understand the language, they don't understand the culture, and hence that could be a significant barrier. Ways around that, of course, is they end up hiring talent from the local market, which helps facilitate a lot of the communication, especially when it comes to multinational corporations bidding for government tenders and government businesses. So I think the cultural difference is one of the barriers to entry. The other barrier that I can think of has to do with some of the unfamiliarity with the local laws. A lot of the mainland laws in many of the GCC countries, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia, could be a bit fragmented. There are usually different sets of regulatory laws, whether it's the immigration law, labor law, data protection law. So you end up actually dealing with multiple government agencies, which can be cumbersome, can be complex for international companies. And we sense sometimes that frustration when it comes for them to do business. What we've done in the Qatar Financial Center to address that is we've set up a legal environment that is parallel to the existing legal environment, which is based on international law, mostly in terms of rules and regulation, but mostly English common law. And hence a lot of the multinational corporations do business in the state of Qatar under English common law and have full access to the entire economy, which helps them, of course, run their affairs easier. A lot of these companies also have to deal with other government agencies, so we facilitate the communication, we facilitate some of the transactions, we try to handhold some of these investors when they communicate with other government agencies, whether it's bidding on a tender or whether it's pitching, whether it's a sales pitch on a certain project, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of some of the measures we believe these governments have taken recently, we can see a massive push towards foreign direct investment in the entire GCC. We've seen plans, national visions in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. We've announced our Qatar National Vision 2030, and one of the biggest pillars there is to facilitate foreign direct investment, and some of that has to do with liberalizing employment laws, liberalizing investment laws. There's 100% foreign ownership allowed pretty much in most GCC countries in all sectors, including in Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Yeah. So it's very easy for businesses today to set up without the need of a partner or what we used to call a sponsor. Back in the day, the 5149 kind of partnership used to apply across the GCC. I could safely say today that there's not a country in the GCC where 100% foreign ownership is allowed. There's not a country in the GCC, including Qatar, where visas are open and there's freedom of movement for employees within the economy easily, swiftly, and efficiently. So all these national visions, including Qatar National Vision, is about attracting foreign direct investment. So we expect that, whether it's bankruptcy laws, whether it's investment protection laws, whether it's immigration laws, we see a full push towards liberalization because this entire region, including Qatar, wants to diversify away from oil and gas and wants to attract basically businesses and increase the population and help push the economy forward, specifically on the non-hydrocarbon segment of the GDP.
That's really, really insightful. And I want to build on that with you, Patricia, coming in from an international business. So it's sort of the flip side of where Yousuf's looking from. And I want to ask you, what do you see are the unique benefits of the Gulf and for businesses looking to operate within the region from your standpoint?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me for a great event. And just building on Yousuf's response, which I absolutely agree with in terms of, yes, there are some challenges, but the benefits in this region we certainly find very exciting. And at HSBC, our mission really is around international connectivity. So we spend a lot of time talking to clients around the world about the opportunities that exist in the Middle East. And we highlight things like the dramatic change that has happened in terms of the demographics. You have a very young population. The dramatic change that's happened in terms of the level of education of that population over the last generation. The participation of women in the workforce. The high income per household, which creates opportunities for consumer goods companies. The sophisticated logistics platforms that exist in this region. The digitization of these economies. And Yousuf mentioned a lot of the enablers that this region has focused on. The elimination of restrictions around foreign ownership, the strengthening of intellectual property rights. These are all factors which have been really developed by governments, by regulators, to be able to attract the investment that is needed for this region to transition their dependency on hydrocarbons. And we see that very actively stated with all the statements for the various visions in the various countries. Additionally to the transition, we see the huge development in terms of trade. It's hard to open a newspaper any day of the week that you don't see a new trade agreement being penned, a new MOU being discussed. Just this week, we've heard an announcement of potentially 20 MOUs being signed while we're here at QEF in Qatar. And that brings a huge amount of interest from international companies that are our clients all over the world to participate in that growth, in those MOUs, in those trade initiatives. We are also seeing, Farah, a shift in terms of the interest from a trade perspective. Historically, it's been a very strong Western shift, Western focus. We're seeing a shift east. And we're seeing a huge amount of interest from our clients in the east part of the world, certainly driven by, I would say, China and India in participating in the growth here in this region. So a very exciting time for us.
Now, Hussain, I think you bring a really interesting perspective of the newer companies coming in, and you have HSBC clients looking at deploying capital in the region. You have the regulator working on removing barriers. What are you seeing with your companies? Where do they see challenges, but also where are they excelling in a way in the Gulf that they wouldn't be otherwise?
So sure. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. It's great to be in here. So basically, with the new initiatives that were introduced by the governments in here, derived by the visions that have been announced in the last few years, we have seen a number of derives to ease the expanding businesses into GCC. Let me talk about Saudi in particular for a second. The Ministry of Investment, MISA, have introduced something called Invest Saudi, whereby a single supporting letter from our side as an investor, our portfolio companies can instantly acquire an investment license. And then by that, they can start operating within Saudi market within no time. That is unprecedented in the Saudi market. That's been a very, very big challenge and a hurdle to start businesses in here. But right now, we have seen it over and over with a number of our portfolio companies. Not only that, but the regulator, again, started introducing a number of reforms within the capital market authorities, central banks as well, by having the sandbox environment to ease for fintechs to start testing within this environment before they acquire the full license, which is a really big improvement within a short period of time. And we've been hearing that a lot by other governmental entities, whether it's Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and other GCC countries. UAE started with that a few years back, and now it's just like a snowball effect that is affecting the entire region in here.
That's really interesting. I want to build on what you were saying and ask you, what is, where is the sweet spot between government sponsorship, but also at what point do you start to say, no, I need foreign capital? You know, how do you start working on that, shifting from just the reliance on government and bringing in foreign capital?
Can you say that again, Farah?
So how do you start shifting, you know, businesses' mentality from just focusing on government funding and starting to look at international capital?
That's an interesting question, honestly speaking. We have seen a number of startups starting from scratch, bootstrapping, being involved within incubators, let's say, whether they are sponsored, those incubators, by governmental entities or standalone entities, or get accelerated by, again, regional accelerators, whether they are operated by local operator or foreign global regulator. And then they discover that governmental money, which is not really easy to acquire right now, it's much easier and better for them to get it through financial institutions, whether they are venture capitals or private equity and so on. Because that money definitely are going to lead them for the next stage of the business. And that is, I mean, it's eventually this is how they scale their businesses, through private money, where they can scale them from a stage to another.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that that's where the distinction is starting to come clear, that it's not just going to be government money in the Gulf anymore. And Yousuf, I want to come back to what you mentioned. I think you brought up talent, and I want to ask you, how easy or difficult have you found attracting talent in the region, and what more can be done to bring more of those skilled into the region and retain them?
So, I mean, if you look at any GCC city, I could definitely classify Dubai, Riyadh, Doha as being a metropolitan. There's different nationalities all over these cities. And as a matter of fact, the local population is usually, with the exception of Saudi, of course, usually the local population is probably 15 to 20% of the entire population. We had an issue from a Qatari perspective in terms of talent 15 years back, I would say, during my early generation. And the government realized that problem and started investing heavily in education. Today, 5% of our government budget goes into, 5 to 8% goes into health and education. 15 years back, I would say there was a handful of high schools in Qatar, 5 local and maybe 1 international. Pretty much everybody in my generation probably went to a public school, with very few exceptions. Fast forward today, 2024, you have what is called, the Qatar Foundation, which has 5 top US universities. You have 2 local universities as well, Qatar universities, and I'd consider HBKU a local university as well. So there's a lot of educational institutions in Qatar that has been able to give birth to a new breed of talent in Qatar, which is multi-diverse, local with a vast international knowledge, which is recently started to feed into the economy and feed into some of the private sector occupations and public sector. So talent is being solved. There's heavy investments from the government, but there's no shortage of importing international talent. And for us in Qatar, we've always said that we want to attract foreign direct investment, and that comes with foreign talent coming to Qatar as well. So talent in the GCC and in Qatar is going to be very crucial for our national visions. It's not only going to be local breed, there's going to be a lot of international talent. We want international talent to also start investing in their businesses and bringing some of that know-how locally and mingling with the local talent. So I see a diverse international pool of talent in the region building up. As of now, I would still say that a lot of the talent comes from abroad, especially when these international companies invest in Qatar. Most of the companies I see that invest in the Qatar Financial Center or invest in the free zones come with their own talent, and they hire local talent as well. But there are very good benefits in the GCC in terms of retaining talents. A lot of families that move to the GCC in Qatar love it. They usually stay for the long term. The quality of life is top-notch. The work-family balance cannot be found anywhere in the world, as in the GCC. There's a very perfect balance between work and family. And on top of that, I believe that the quality of life that is being built and the infrastructure and the lifestyle in the GCC is becoming top to none in terms of comparison globally. So, I think retaining talent in the GCC and in Qatar is going to flourish in the near future.
Do you share the same view, Patricia? And is there anything else you can add on attracting talent?
It's really hard to follow Yousuf because his answers are so comprehensive. I only have two things to add to that. I think that let's not forget the impact that permanent residency has provided for expats in this region in terms of permanency and really seeing this as a home. That's one thing. And the second thing is, I remember when my family moved to Abu Dhabi 40 years ago, you still paid expats a risk premium to come to the region. My father came here as an engineer, and at the time, all the engineers came from abroad. Now you don't pay a risk premium to come into Abu Dhabi or into the UAE or into Qatar. At HSBC, I have a list of people that would die to come and work in Dubai, which is where I'm based. So foreigners want to come and participate in this region, and therefore it is absolutely a magnet for talent. And the permanent residency has helped that as well.
So,
and I think
please.
income tax is definitely a plus. There's zero income tax for expats, obviously locals as well, which is, I think, a huge advantage over everywhere in the world.
I can attest to that. What about you?
If you allow me to add a little bit about that.
Yes, please.
The talent acquisition and retaining the talents, it's a huge discussion in every sector, in every country, every single time of the year. So whatever sector you are operating within, there is challenges within attracting the best talent, if we may say. However, let me go back in history just a little bit. I'm talking about startups. Yahoo acquired Maktub, which was actually built in here in the region. Amazon acquired Souk.com, which was built in the region. Uber acquired Careem, which is still in the region. Jahiz, Talabat alike, just got listed into Saudi stock exchange for valuation of more than $2 billion. Yes. It's in Saudi. Not necessarily all of the talents are based in Saudi, however, it's Saudi-based company. And the list goes on and on and on. This is one part. The other part is just like what we're hearing about the PayPal mafia. After the acquisition, the partners started their own ventures and they're thriving. This is exactly what's happening in here. Careem, after the acquisition, a number of their executive staff started their own ventures and they're thriving with their businesses. And this is only at the beginning. It's going to take longer time. However, until then, we're still seeing a lot of talents starting their own businesses. And the pool is just getting bigger, actually, the pool of talents. not to mention what Yousuf has just mentioned, the scholarship programs, the educational systems, the vocational training, but the most influential part is the experience through the successful startups.
Thank you so much. That was a really insightful intervention. And Patricia, I go back to you because we're at the Qatar Economic Forum. This is Bloomberg, so I have to ask about finance and the future of finance and the sector, particularly in the region. What do you think is going to look? What's that going to look like in the future?
Well, Farah, we're starting to see that change already. I would say that the sector has increasingly become more sophisticated in this region. I would highlight a couple of points. One is digitization and what it has done in terms of user experience. The consumers of financial services now demand consuming financial services like they would on their app. And so you think about the digitization of payments and the user experience around how they interact with consuming banking services and financial services has really transformed, and I think the region is stepping up. The other element I would say is we talked about the significant transition the region needs to undergo and has committed to undergoing, and that means a significant amount of infrastructure investment. So we're also seeing the rise of PPP, private-public partnerships, as a way to finance that transition. We were talking earlier about the role that the private capital has to play alongside government capital. So the rise of PPP as a format to finance that infrastructure investment is another trend, I would say. And last but not least, I have to give a nod to the rise of sustainable finance and the role that it has to play in really aligning financial incentives with the transitions that companies have to go through. And so we're definitely seeing, you know, for HSBC, it's one of our core missions is to help our clients in their transition journey, and the role that finance plays in doing that, whether that is greening through supply chains, whether that is looking at aligning the investment that you raise, the capital that you raise, to how you use those proceeds. These are all instruments that are being developed and are being deployed in this region to promote more sustainable transition.
Yousuf, as the CEO of the Qatar Financial Center, if you could briefly wrap us up with what you think is the future of finance, what are you working on? What are your key missions in your company?
So, I mean, just like all the other financial centers in the region that are benefiting, I think, you know, when good things happen in one country, I think all the other countries benefit. There's good things happening in Saudi, there's good things happening in Qatar, there's good things happening in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And everybody, I think, will benefit one way or another. From a KFC perspective, we're, of course, a smaller market. We cater for our local needs. We have, you know, international banks established in Qatar to do business in Qatar and to expand in other markets other than Qatar. Some of them end up doing business in Saudi. Some of them end up actually locating in Saudi and in the UAE and Qatar. So, and I think that's beneficial for everybody. But from the QFC perspective, we're looking at, you know, 4 big themes. I think wealth management is one of them. There's a lot of wealth transition globally, especially with the geopolitical situation globally. We see a lot of wealth transitioning from Europe into Asia. A lot of that is going into Dubai. We'd want to capture, you know, some of that, 10 to 15%. Also, we see a lot of asset management activity in the region. There is a lot of fund activity moving into the region because of the better tax regime and easier tax regime, and because of the cumbersome tax enforcement in other jurisdictions. We're looking at financial technology and digitalization. We want to launch tokenization out of the Qatar Financial Center, and we want to attract financial technology companies to do business and partner with our local financial institutions. We don't want to disrupt the industry, but we want them to partner with the industry and start, you know, launching buy now, pay laters, digital banks, and tokenization out of the KFC. And hopefully within that, we want to look at some homegrown breed and mix with international talent. Not very far from what our brothers in Saudi are doing and our friends in the UAE are also doing.
Yeah.